The wind cut across the Wyoming plain like a dull knife, carrying snow and sorrow in equal measure. And that was how the story began, not with joy or church bells, but with a man standing alone at a grave on Christmas Eve. Elias Crowley's hat was pulled low, his coat heavy with frost, his boots planted in frozen earth beside the wooden marker that bore his wife's name. The sky hung low and grey, and the ranch house behind him sat dark and silent, waiting for a woman who was already dead and another who had not yet arrived. Elias had been a hard man before grief took him, the kind shaped by cattle drives, broken fences, and long nights under open stars, but the winter after Mary died had hollowed him out. He came to the grave every morning and every night, talking low as if she might answer, telling her about the herd, about the broken pump, about how the house still smelled faintly of her bread. Christmas Eve made it worse, because Mary had loved Christmas, loved the hymns and the candles, loved believing that even the loneliest night could be made warm. The idea of a mail-order bride had come to him in a moment of weakness, months earlier, when the loneliness pressed so hard he thought it might crack his ribs. The letter he wrote was plain and honest. He needed a wife to help him keep the ranch running, to give him a reason to keep going. He did not promise romance, only a roof, steady work, and respect. He almost burned the reply when it came, because agreeing felt like a betrayal. But the winter was long and the house was empty now. The train whistle echoed faintly from miles away, unheard by Elias as he knelt in the snow. He did not know that the woman who had answered his letter was stepping down onto the platform in a borrowed coat, clutching a small valise and a hope she barely trusted. He did not know her name yet, did not know that Christmas Eve would bring more than memories. He only knew that the ache in his chest would not ease. No matter how long he stayed by the grave, Clara Whitfield stood stiffly as the train pulled away, its smoke drifting like a ghost into the winter sky. The town was smaller than she had imagined, just a handful of buildings huddled against the cold. She drew her scarf tighter and looked around, half expecting someone to be waiting for her. But the platform was nearly empty. A lantern swung near the depot door, and the air smelled of coal and snow. She told herself not to be afraid. She had come too far for fear now. Her life back east had narrowed to a single choice: remain an unpaid burden in her aunt's crowded house, or answer the letter of a widowed rancher seeking a wife. Elias Crowley's words had been careful and spare, but there was kindness in them, and honesty. She packed her few belongings and boarded the train with a mixture of dread and determination. Christmas Eve felt like a strange day to arrive, but perhaps it was fitting. A day of endings and beginnings tangled together as Clara stepped off the platform, snow crunching beneath her boots. She wondered what kind of man would send for a stranger while still mourning another woman. She wondered if she would be compared to a ghost, if the house would feel haunted by memories she could never replace. Still, she lifted her chin. She was not coming to steal a place in someone's heart, only to earn one. She believed that even the coldest ground could be warmed, given time and patience. Miles away, Elias finally rose from the grave, brushing snow from his coat. The sky had begun to darken, and the stars blinked to life one by one. He whispered goodbye to Mary, his voice rough, and turned toward the ranch house, unaware that a woman was standing in the cold town below, waiting for a man who did not yet know how to look forward again. Christmas Eve stretched between them like a fragile bridge, untested, but standing. Elias did not go to town until the next morning. Christmas Day dawned pale and bitter. The ranch chores waited for no man. Grief or not, he fed the cattle, broke ice in the trough, and fixed a loose hinge with hands that moved from habit alone. It was not until near noon that old Mr. Hanley rode up, his horse steaming in the cold, and asked plain as day why Elias had not come for the woman from the train. The word struck like a rifle shot. A woman, Elias repeated, his chest tightening. The mail-order bride, Hanley said. She waited half the night before Mrs. Pritchard took her in guilt. Settled heavy as Elias saddled his horse and rode hard toward town. Snow kicked up behind him, every mile filled with thoughts he did not want. Mary's grave, the letter, the promise he had made without knowing if he could keep it. When he reached the Pritchard boarding house, Clara was standing by the window, her hands clasped tight. She turned at the sound of boots, and for a moment neither of them spoke. She was younger than he expected, eyes steady but tired, her hair tucked away neat and plain. "Merry Christmas," she said softly, and the words felt strange in his mouth. When he answered, the ride back to the ranch was quiet, broken only by the creak of leather and the wind. Elias offered his coat when he saw her shiver, and she accepted without comment. Pulling it close like a shield, the ranch house came into view, weathered wood and smoke from the chimney. Clara took it in with careful eyes, noting the size, the isolation, the way the land rolled away empty and wide. It was not fear she felt, but resolve. She had chosen this, and she would not be chased off by silence inside the house. The absence of Mary Crowley was everywhere. In the empty rocker by the stove, in the folded quilt at the foot of the bed, in the faint smell of soap and dried herbs. Clara felt it like a presence. She moved gently, as if any loud step might break something fragile. Elias showed her the spare room, his voice stiff, explaining plain rules, separate rooms, shared work, respect. She nodded, meeting his eyes. Respect goes both ways, Mr. Crowley, she said, and for the first time since Mary died, something like surprise flickered across his face. The days that followed settled into a rhythm shaped by winter. Clara rose early, helping with meals, mending clothes, and learning the ways of the ranch. She was not afraid of work. Her hands roughened quickly, and Elias watched from a distance, unsure what to do with the quiet strength she carried. He spoke little, but he did not stop her. When she asked questions, he answered. When she offered ideas, he listened, and slowly, without either of them naming it, a partnership began to form at night. The house grew heavy with unspoken things. Elias often sat by the stove, staring into the fire, lost in memory. Clara learned to give him space, but not distance. She would set a cup of coffee near his hand, or leave a fresh blanket on his chair. Small kindnesses that asked for nothing. Once, when a storm howled so fierce the walls seemed to groan, she heard him speak Mary's name in his sleep. Her heart clenched, not with jealousy, but with understanding. Loving a man meant loving his past. To one evening, as Clara baked bread, the smell filling the house warm and familiar, Elias froze in the doorway, his face pale. Mary used to bake on Sundays, he said quietly. Clara turned, flour on her hands. I am not here to replace her, she answered, only to build something new. The words hung between them, raw and honest. Elias nodded once, the tightness in his chest easing just a fraction. It was the first time he let himself believe that grief and hope might exist side by side by the end of the week. The ranch felt different, not healed, but alive in a way it had not been for months. Laughter did not fill the rooms, but neither did emptiness. Christmas passed without celebration, yet something deeper marked the days. Two strangers bound by circumstance, learning each other step by careful step. Beyond the frozen fields and the silent grave, a fragile future waited, uncertain and demanding, but no longer impossible. Winter loosened its grip slowly, like a stubborn hand that did not want to let go. And with the passing weeks, Elias found himself standing at Mary's grave less often, not because he loved her less, but because the days demanded more of him now. The herd needed moving, fences needed mending, and Clara was no longer just a quiet presence in the house, but a steady force beside him, riding out with him when the weather allowed, learning the land as if it were a language she meant to speak fluently. Yet the past did not surrender. One grey afternoon, Elias finally took Clara with him to the grave. The wind cold and sharp, his voice low and strained as he spoke Mary's name aloud, telling his wife about the woman who now shared the ranch, his guilt laid bare in the open air. And Clara stood a few steps back, hands folded, honoring both the love that had been and the truth that still was. The moment stretched thin and painful. Elias expecting anger or judgment from the living woman beside him, but when he turned, Clara's eyes were soft, not wounded, not resentful, only full of a quiet courage that caught him off guard. She mattered, she said gently, and she always will. I am not here to erase her, only to walk forward with you. The words struck deeper than any accusation could have, and something inside Elias finally gave way. The wall he had built around his grief cracking just enough to let the cold air escape. He bowed his head, tears freezing on his lashes, while Clara laid a small sprig of pine on the grave, a promise of respect and peace, offered without demand. From that day on, the ranch felt less like a place of mourning and more like a place of work and purpose again. Elias laughed once, sudden and surprised by the sound of it, when Clara bested him at cards by the fire, and though the laugh faded quickly, it left something behind, a warmth that lingered. They spoke more freely now, about the future, about the cattle, about repairs and plans, and sometimes, cautiously, about themselves. Clara told him of the narrow life she had escaped back east, of the quiet fear of becoming invisible. And Elias listened in a way he had not listened to anyone since Mary, realizing that this woman had her own scars, her own losses, carried just as carefully. Spring arrived, not with sudden joy, but with steady persistence. Snow retreating inch by inch, grass pushing through frozen ground, and with it came a test neither of them expected. A late storm swept down from the mountains, fierce and unforgiving, scattering the herd and trapping Elias miles from the house. Clara waited through the long night, fear tightening her chest with every hour that passed, memories of abandonment whispering dark thoughts. Yet she did not falter. She saddled a horse at dawn and rode out into the breaking storm, following tracks and instinct, finding Elias cold and injured but alive, the relief that flooded her face undeniable. And in that moment Elias saw the truth plain as daylight. This woman had chosen him, not out of duty, but out of will. Recovery was slow, giving them time they could not avoid. Elias laid up near the stove while Clara ran the ranch with quiet authority. Neighbors took notice, offering help and, in their glances, approval. The house filled with the smells of cooking and the sound of conversation again. And one evening, as the fire crackled low, Elias reached for Clara's hand without thinking, the contact simple and grounding. No rush, no pressure, just acknowledgement. She did not pull away, and in that silence a new promise formed, unspoken but understood, that whatever came next would be built on trust rather than fear. When Elias finally asked her to stay, not as an arrangement but as a true partner, his voice shook more than it ever had in the face of danger. Clara did not answer at once. She looked out the window at the land she had come to know, the wide sky, the hard soil that had tested her and strengthened her. Then she turned back to him, eyes clear. "I am already home," she said, and the simple truth of it settled deep into both of them. Easing old wounds while leaving their scars honored. The wedding was small, held under open sky with the mountains watching and the wind carrying their vows across the fields. No grand celebration, only neighbors, shared food, and quiet joy. Mary's memory was not hidden away. Elias spoke her name once, thanking her for the years she had given him, before turning fully toward the woman who stood beside him now. Clara's hand warm in his, the future uncertain, but no longer lonely. The land itself seemed to breathe easier, as if recognizing the balance finally restored years later. When Christmas Eve came again with snow and starlight, the ranch house glowed warm against the dark, laughter spilling out into the cold night. Elias stood for a moment at the window, watching Clara move through the room, strong and sure, the past resting gently behind him rather than weighing him down. Grief had shaped him, love had remade him, and under that vast western sky he understood at last that life did not ask a man to forget, only to keep riding forward, heart open, even when the trail had once been marked by loss.